All right. Thanks everyone for joining our webinar today. We have as our guest presenter one of Silverlight Show's most appreciated presenter, Gill Cleeren. And he will talk today on a very popular and very appreciated topic, Metro and WinRT for the Silverlight and WPF Developer. So before I give the word to Gill, I want to let you know that this webinar will continue for about 55 or 60 minutes. And after that, we'll have a short Q&A session, approximately 10 minutes duration. So feel welcome to address any questions you have during the webinar using the chat option in your webinar panel. Have in mind, however, that all questions will be addressed at the end of the webinar. So make sure you provide enough detail in your question so Gill may address it at the end. We have some giveaways that Gill will announce. So Gill, shall we start? Yeah?
That's fine for me.
All right.
All right. Good evening, everyone. At least for me, it's evening here. Broadcasting to you from a very cold Belgium here. And we are going to be talking about, as Svetla mentioned, about Metro and WinRT. So we are going to be talking about how you can leverage what you know today as a XAML developer, being that Silverlight, being that WPF, or being that Windows Phone. I'm going to introduce you to Windows 8 and the development model that we have there for Metro-style application development. And we are going to focus on the things that you already know today and how they can be transferred and carried forward into the Windows 8 Metro app development. So that is going to be the focus of this talk. Let me introduce you very quickly to who I am. So my name is Gill Cleeren. I am working as a .NET architect at Ordina here in Belgium. And I'm also a Microsoft RD and a Silverlight MVP. I'm doing a lot of sessions all over Europe. In the next coming weeks, I'm traveling throughout Europe again because it's tech days and dev days in a lot of countries. I've been in a lot of countries, as you can see here. I have my own user group here in Belgium as well. And I've written a book, and more on that in just a second. So you can read my blog and send me a mail at the addresses that you see there on the slide. And you can also ask me anything on Twitter. My Twitter handle is simply at Gill Cleeren. All right. So as already mentioned, questions will be done at the end of the talk, and this this webinar is also recorded entirely. So a link of the video will be sent to you after we are finished here today. Okay. So about some giveaways that we have planned, there is a webinar survey in which you can give comments about this session, and also some suggestions about things that you want to hear in some next webinars. If you complete one of these, you can win one of the ebooks that we are giving away that will get you ready for the Microsoft Silverlight exam. And there is also something else that you can win, and that is a copy of my book as an ebook, and you can win that by tweeting about this webinar. Any comments, any feedback that you have, any questions that you have about this webinar after this webinar ends, you can send them to on Twitter to me and to the Silverlight Show team by tweeting them with the tag, so hash webinar Silverlight Show. That's what you need to include, and then we can find them on Twitter. Just some small publicity for myself. So I have written a new book on Silverlight. That's going to be, of course, on Silverlight 5, and it's completely updated for Silverlight 5. Again, being focused on the enterprise level stuff that comes to you when you write applications, business applications in Silverlight. It's extended quite a lot. It's about 700 pages, so that's 250 pages extra, and all the other content is reviewed, updated for Silverlight 5. So if you're interested in that, it is going to be available probably at the end of this month or in the first week of March, so it's very close to being finished, and you can read more about it. I've included a link there, or you can simply go to the Pact website, which is pact.com. All right. So let's go over to this this webinar. And so what I'm going to be doing, I thought about this webinar, how we're going to do this, and developers today are a bit afraid that I'm moving to Windows 8, that they're not going to be, that they're going to have to learn new stuff. In the previous webinar that we did in December, .NET in WinRT, and also we touched on moving XAML knowledge forward. We didn't cover it. And I thought being very interesting about application development. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be talking about several concepts that developer or a WPF developer, it's all the same. So this might look like an overview, an introduction to Silverlight, but it's really not. It's really all about transferring your knowledge into the Windows 8 world. And just as a reminder, we are talking about Metro style application development. Because I have so much to talk about, when I was rehearsing this webinar, we actually decided on splitting it in two, because 2 hours or more of content might be a bit too much, or maybe listening to me for 2 hours might have been too much as well. So that's why we actually made a split. We have 8 topics, and we're going to do 3 today, and we're going to do 5 next week. So in this very part, we're going to be talking about, well, in general, some general XAML concepts that you know and how they might have changed when moving to Windows 8. I'm going to be focusing heavily on controls, what is going on with the old controls, how about the, are there any new controls in Windows 8? And then we're going to take a look at navigation as well. That is what we're going to be talking about today. And in the next webinar, which is going to take place exactly 1 week from now, that is on Thursday, the 9th of February. We're going to do a dive into data in your Windows application, data in your Windows 8 application. We're going to take a look at data binding as well as service access. We're going to take a look at the application lifecycle, which is something coming from Windows Phone 7, which was introduced with Windows Phone 7, and concepts of those are living on in Windows 8. We're going to also look next week at tiles, badges in Windows 8, and again that is something coming into the Windows 8 world, courtesy again of Windows Phone. We're going to also look at input and output, and that is all the topics that we're going to see next week in another Silverlight Show webinar. Okay. So just to be clear on what we are going to be, focusing on today, I talked about this slide in the previous webinar, and this is a slide that I took from the Build Windows conference in September. And so this is actually the architecture of Windows 8 on top of Windows, let's say, not the architecture, but basically where developers should be looking to. So basically you can develop Metro style apps. That's what you see there on the left. And then you can continue building your regular desktop apps with .NET, with Silverlight, in ASP.NET as a Win32 application. That's not what we're going to be talking about today. That all remains more or less the same. We are going to be focusing on the Metro style apps on top of WinRT. And in that very part, I am of course going to be focusing on the XAML part. Note that you can now start building XAML apps or Metro applications, also using C and C++. We are going to focus, of course, on the C# part, and that is exactly the same in VB, so for managed languages. So that's what we are going to be focusing on. Now, I thought a bit about a different concept for this talk, and maybe you've already taken a look at the slides. I saw on Twitter there were some people already tweeting about it. So everyone is talking today about badges. Foursquare has badges. Visual Studio now has badges. So what I'm going to be doing today is give you a virtual badge. I'm not going to give it to you as a physical badge, but I'm going to give it to you as a virtual badge that you can say that you already know this specific topic in Windows 8. And at the end of these 2 webinars, you're going to maybe end up with 8 badges. We'll see about that, and we'll see how easy or how difficult it is to transfer your knowledge to Windows 8. So, without further ado, let's take a look at how we can win or how we can achieve that first badge. And that first badge, you can see it right up there in the right corner. It is the general XAML for Windows 8 badge. So that's what we're going to be talking about. Some general stuff on XAML. and how that moves on to Windows 8. Okay. Now, when thinking about the build conference, what you saw was Windows 8 running on a lot of devices. It was running on desktop PCs, it was running on notebooks, and it was also focused, or the conference was also focused around devices that are supporting touch input. But taking a step back from that, being able to run on all these kinds of devices brings for the developer some, let's say, difficulties to the table, in a sense that he will be responsible to make sure that his application runs on each of those devices nicely. It should be, the application should be giving a good experience on any screen resolution or screen type it is actually running on. When thinking of Silverlight, developers are focused with this, are faced with the same problems. You don't know what resolution the end user of your Silverlight application is going to be working with. It's running inside of the browser, so you basically don't know what it's going to be. So that is a problem that Silverlight developers were already facing. They solved that by building XAML layouts that are flexible in a sense that they stretch, that they align again based on the available resolution. So that is now, again with Windows 8, very important when building XAML-based applications, so Metro-style applications. The user will be able to select several types of devices. Windows 8 is going to run on it, and you as a developer need to make sure that your application is going to look nice on the device. Now, thinking about resolutions, this is actually what Microsoft says. Windows 8 will only run on devices with a resolution with at least 1024 by 768 pixels. It will not run on a device with a lower resolution. Now, they are also talking about this so-called baseline resolution, which is 1366 by 768. Now, before we actually dive into the differences between these things, I'm going to quickly open Visual Studio. I'm going to use, of course, the Visual Studio Developer Preview, this one, which is the Express Edition, which is only available on the Windows 8 install that you have right now, and it's allowing you to build Windows 8 applications, Metro-style applications. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly build using one of the default templates. Let me use the grid application because that's a good one to see. I'm going to quickly create one of these, and I'm going to explain you a bit about the resolutions and how the applications should stretch. So this is a so-called grid application. It has already by default a grid view in there, and we'll talk about the grid view more a bit later in this talk. So I'm going to run it. And we have tested this, and this should look nice on while looking at the webinar, because this application is of course going to open in full screen. So it's now deploying the application. There we go. So now it's starting the application. What you see now is the application filling the entire screen. Now, when I, for example, go over here and I drag in my desktop, I can move my desktop to either of these sizes There we go. Now I've dropped my Visual Studio, so my entire desktop, on the right side over there. And now I can move again. And there now my running application is moving on over to the right. And as you can see, it's changing layout. I'm going to talk about that a bit later on. So what it's actually doing here now, it is working with these resolutions. So this device is now running 1600 by 900. But this part that you see here on the left, that is a so-called snap view. And that is always 320 pixels wide. Now, we as developers, as XAML developers, need to make sure that our application, if it is running in either of these states, still looks nice. Now, the reason that I actually jumped over here very quickly, let's go back to the slides, was actually to explain you the difference between this 1366 and this 1024. Devices need at least 1024, but they support the snap view when the device has a minimum resolution of 1366 by 768. We as developers need to make sure that our apps look nice on each of those devices and each of those resolutions. Of course, many devices will have a much higher resolution, but working with XAML, we are able to cope with that. XAML supports fluid layout. We already know how to build an application that fills the entire screen. We can do that. We have star sizing. We have horizontal and vertical stretching. That is already knowledge that we have today. If you look at this XAML here, this is actually a fixed layout. You have a grid that in this case has 3 defined columns with a width of 250 pixels. Now if we want to highlight or want to focus the user's attention on the red rectangle that you see there, it's actually not possible to do it this way. What we need to do is we need to introduce star sizing. And using star sizing, the red part, which is needing the focus of the user, is in this case receiving 3 stars. So what XAML does in this case, it's actually counting the stars. So that's 1 star, 3, and another. That's 5 stars. So in total, it will actually give 60% of the available width, no matter what that width is, to the red part. So we are actually coping with different screen sizes, with a fluid layout supported by XAML. I already talked a bit about this snapping. And we'll see the snapping in code in just a second. So snap view is actually new. When you have a device that is at least running or has a resolution that is at least at 1366 by 768, snap view is available. Users can snap your application, no matter what your application is. If you don't want to support it, you can't switch it off as a developer. Your applications will always be able to be snapped. They are always snappable, let's say. Now, you as a developer need to make sure that using some XAML code, and I'm going to show you some tricks to do that in just a second in the code, you as a developer need to make sure that when the application goes from the filled state to the snapped state and vice versa, that it keeps on looking good on each of those resolutions. Now, you may think that I'm building an application that really doesn't support snap view. That is possible. That's very well possible. For example, if you have a game that shouldn't be snapped perhaps, you can pause the game. That's a perfect good solution. But again, you should focus, you should pay attention that you actually cope with this snapping of an application. You can actually snap using touch, of course, but you can also snap with the keyboard using the Win key and then the dot key. Oh. So this actually shows you again what I already showed you in the demo a bit. So on the left we have there the 320 pixels wide snap view, 1024, that's where we get the minimum resolution for 1024. So anything lower than 1366 doesn't support snap view. That also means that in portrait view there is no snap view available. So this application actually, as you can see here, is now filling the screen. That's what I showed you already in the slide. So in the demo, it's moving to the left or moving to the right, and in both cases it still looks good. The user can still work with it. It shows the same content. It is possible to pass context because it's simply the same application running that knows that it's now in one of the different states. So this is full screen, filling the entire screen, whatever the resolution is. This is snap view and this is filled state. Keep those terms in mind because we're going to use them in code in just a second. Now also users will be able to rotate with the device. They will. It's a tablet. Of course, this is of course focused on tablet devices, but they will rotate it. Now what about rotation? Again, that is something that we can cope with XAML. You saw that my application when going to snap view also changed the layout, and it also coped with those with that smaller resolution. The same thing goes with when you move into when you actually start rotating the device. Applications need to, if they support orientation or being rotated, let's say, we should actually support from our layout in XAML that we can actually cope with different resolutions. If you have things like a grid view or a wrap grid, we'll see those later on. When the application is noticing that it has more vertical space or more horizontal space, it should reorder its children so that it is still filling the screen. Now applications can also specify what is going to be their preferred orientation and also what is their locked orientation. In the application manifest, and I'm going to show you the manifest later in the demo, applications can specify that they want an initial rotation. And that initial rotation can be specified by saying, I want, or basically what it says is, when the splash screen is showing, show it in this particular rotation. In this case, the initial rotation preference is set to landscaped and flipped. It's basically going to show the splash screen in a landscape format, but flipped. Now, if you specify, or if you want to specify, this is something that you can do. You can specify that your application should only run in a particular orientation. You can't do that at this point from the manifest. You can do it from code in the onLaunched. In the onLaunched, you can specify your auto-rotation preferences to be landscaped or landscaped and flipped in this case. So this one specifies that it will rotate if you rotate the device 1 degrees, but it will not go into portrait mode. That's what we're saying here. When thinking about how this was in previously in Silverlight, we had the resize event. So if the user was resizing the browser window, we actually got events that we could subscribe to and trigger things, for example, in custom controls so that they would stretch. In Windows 8, it's actually becoming a bit easier. We have layout state changes, so the layout can be in filled or in snap state, and we get an event that triggers when the state changes. We also get an event that triggers when the orientation changes. So then we can subscribe to these events and actually change the layout. Now, if you think about this, and the word that is inside of the middle of the slide there, a state change, doesn't that ring a bell? Yes, maybe. States in controls in Silverlight. How did we manage those? With the Visual State Manager. You probably know what it does. It's basically allowing you to specify a different template or different layout for a particular state. Now you can do now what you could do with the Visual State Manager, and we will use the Visual State Manager again with controls, but now you can use the Visual State Manager as a way to specify the state of my app. So the state of the app can be in full screen, it can be in filled, it can be in snapped, and it can be in portrait. When we define in our XAML a different layout, and then specify using the Visual State Manager go to state, we can easily adapt our XAML layout to changing layouts. Okay, that's a lot of slides. Let's go to the demo. All right, so it is not this Visual Studio, it is this Visual Studio that I want to use. So let me first start by running the application. So what you see here is now that the application is in full screen. We see a full screen app here, and using some keyboard keys, I'm moving it to the left, to the right, and now I'm moving it to the left. Again, I can do this if I would have a touch device. I can do this with my finger, and now I'm doing it with the mouse. As you can see, what you can see is that my layout of the app is changing. When I drag in Visual Studio, so my desktop view, it's going snap view. The input and the description thing is actually horizontally ordered. When I now move to snap view, you see that things are now ordered vertically. Okay, now how did we do that? Let's go and take a look at the code. Let's open this main page. And if you take a look at the code here, you see that, so this is the main page, it's just one page. It has a Visual State Manager on its root control, on the layout root. And its Visual State Manager, this happens sometimes in my Visual Studio, and it seems to be a common problem. We have to wait a couple of seconds before it's actually coming out of the sleeping state. There we go. So what you see here is that I have a Visual State group defined on my Visual State Manager. I have a full state, which is simply the default layout. I have a fill state, I have a portrait state, and I have a snapped state. Now what did we have in that snap state? A vertically ordered stack panel. So what you see here, I'm going to drag to the right, you see the input panel is the target of the animation of a Visual State board, and it says that the orientation is vertical. If you take a look at the fill state, then we see that this input panel here has an orientation horizontal. So these are different states for my root control. Now, how do we actually trigger these states? By the way, if we take a look at the regular XAML and also the Visual State Manager, it's exactly the same. If you know XAML, you can leverage it in Windows 8. Now let's take a look at the code. Again, it's very simple because we're going to continue using that Visual State Manager ID. So let me scroll down here. So in this layout changed here, this is actually the event that is coming to you as a developer from Windows saying, oh, the device has changed has changed view. It has perhaps gone to snap state. So we can handle that event. in this on layout changed here. And in this on layout changed here, I'm going to check what is the current state, and then I'm going to use the Visual State Manager to go to a particular state. And so my XAML is going to reorder itself in order to cope with that change of UI. And I can also ask, of course, what is going to be the current state. In this method here, I'm doing that exact thing here, using the application layout state, which is actually coming from this window UI view management application layout dot value. I get a value of what is the current layout of my application. So I can ask my app, are you snaps currently, or are you in filled state? And I can react to that further in code. So what you need to remember from this is that things that you already know, the Visual State Manager is probably the most important block in this thing. It's actually allowing you to make sure that your XAML knowledge about ordering a layout and coping with those state changes is actually possible in Windows 8. So I think that there's not a lot new to learn here, and I think we can give ourselves the first batch, which is the general XAML for Windows 8 batch. All right. Let's move on. Let's take a look at some controls. And you can earn another badge in this part, which is the Be in Control with Windows 8 badge. Let's take a look at some controls. Now, I think that part of the success of Silverlight comes of the available controls. Because using these controls, not only from Microsoft, but also from third parties, like Telerik, for example, they offer great controls, making it easy for the developer to actually build a business line or line of business application very quickly. Microsoft decided that most of these controls should be available in Windows 8. And I say most because actually most controls still work. They work in the exact same way, so it's the same control model as in Silverlight, as Windows Phone, as WPF. So the control set is more or less the same today as in Silverlight. I'm not sure if it might be changing when we move to the beta, I'm not sure, but today the control model that we have is more or less the same as Silverlight. That also means that the same properties and the same events mostly are there. Concepts like an animation, like the Visual State Manager, on controls as well, a parts and save model is also available. We'll see that later, the VSM. Actually, we'll see the VSM next week. Now, there are, of course, some new controls as well. I'm going to talk about those in just a minute. Those new controls mostly focus around the items controls, so list controls. And I'm going to show you and explain you why that is the case. Now, one thing that you have to do is think about input. As mentioned, Windows 8 is, of course, focusing heavily on the touch aspect. Now, the same problem exists with Windows Phone. You can write a click event. You can write a tap event on a button, for example. And people often wonder, which one should I actually use? In Windows 8, they actually abstracted these issues away from the developer in a sense that Microsoft added some new events on the existing controls, the pointer events. So there's a pointer released, a pointer moved, and actually these pointers events will actually be the result of an input of be that a mouse, be that a finger, so a touch input. It doesn't really matter. It's abstracted away for the developer. So that is something that changed, but basically it's just a new type of event. The click events are, for example, still there, but you can now focus on using these pointer events. They are styled. There is a new style on them. It's not a standard Silverlight style. It's actually a style that is really close to the Windows Phone 7 style. It's a default Metro Windows 8 style. So most controls made the cut to Windows 8. As you can see here, some of the regular controls and also some of the list controls that we're going to focus on in just a second. So things like a button, a checkbox, a context menu, a combo box, they are all still in Windows 8. There is one that is changed or has a new name. There is no more web browser control. It's now the web view control. So the list controls will focus on those later on. There is a text box which has now support for spelling check. There are some new ones on this slide as well, but as you can see, most controls actually made it into Windows 8. Instead of talking about those, let's move to a small demo. So we are going to take a look at controls, basic controls, that's the one I need. So this one. Okay, thank you very much. Let's open it again, then it will open faster. There we go. So let's open this solution and let's take a look at some controls in action. Might be a bit slower now because it's opening it twice. All right, there we go. So let's run it. It is running on the, I'm running of course the developer preview, which actually works quite well, but it sometimes hangs a bit and it's a bit slow, but it's actually quite good already. So let's take a look first at the button tab here. So there is a button on this thing here, on the screen. I can click on the button. We could click on the button, we can still click on the button. The code for this button is exactly the same as the regular XAML button. This one is a new one, that's toggle switch. It's actually not really new because it's coming from Windows Phone 7. There's a checkbox, a hyperlink button, a radio button. I think you already know these things. There's a combo box available. They have new behavior. You can see how they slide open, but it's simply the same control. And it works, it's abstracted away from the developer, how they actually are restyled and retemplated, that they work in the exact same fashion. A slider, which can be bound to a text block in this case. As mentioned, properties also remain the same. For example, this image here is now, I'm going to set it in fill, I'm going to set it stretch to none, I'm going to set the stretch to uniform and uniform to fill. That behaves in the exact same way as it did in Silverlight. There's a tooltip that you can see here, and there's a pop-up control as well that you can use. I'm going to jump to Visual Studio, and this is the one that was a bit too late to open, I think. This is the one that we are running. Let's take a look at the XAML code, and I'm going to convince you that this is really nothing new. As you can see here, we have the stack panel control. We have, what do we have here? We have a checkbox. We have a progress bar, which I already showed you. Let me go down a bit on this one. We have the text box control. All these controls, the slider, the image, width, as we saw, the stretch property, they all remain exactly the same thing in Windows 8. So there's nothing really new to learn. Now, of course, there's new things to learn. There's new controls available. Some new and shiny controls. Perhaps they're not really that new. Some controls are completely new. The media player. I think it was one of the biggest frustrations with the media element. The media element, you know. But the biggest frustration with that media element was that it had no default controls. We, as a developer, had to add a play button, a stop button, a slider, a progress bar, and some sound or some volume control. That was not in this control by default. Now it is available through a new control, which is the media player control. The media element is still in there, and just changing the media element tag into media player will give you this default control. The toggle switch. Not really new. I already showed you, coming from Windows Phone 7. The progress ring, it's a new one. It's actually showing the user that he has to wait because something long running is doing its thing. This one, the application bar, is also new. But is it really that new? No, it's not really that new because it is coming from Windows Phone 7. It's the same concept. It is an application bar that most of the time sits at the bottom of your screen. You can place it wherever you want, but the default is placing it at the bottom of the application screen. You can also put one at the top, for example, if you have a lot of controls. This control is actually used to give the user of your application some commands. Remember, as we talked about in the previous webinar, Windows 8 is focusing heavily on the content, not the Chrome. So this application bar will, by default, hide itself. It is not taking any place in the screen. It is not persistent by default. We can set it to be persistent if we want that, but in most cases you will actually allow it to hide itself based on a time or when you interact with the application. So by default, if you have a touch device, the application bar will appear when you swipe from the top or the bottom. If you don't have a touch device, you have to right-click to make this application bar appear. So let's take a look at these new controls in action. I have a few here. Yeah, I already showed you the toggle switch. I'm not going to go there again. I'm going to show you the media player first. So the media player control. There we go. It's opening up. So as mentioned, you already know the media element and you know how it works. It has a play, it has a pause event, it has all kinds of events that you know. And just changing the word media element into media player will make this media player work for you. As you can see, I just changed it. There's nothing really new going on. I'm going to run this thing and it's going to show me a file picker. Select the file here. I have a video file that I recorded sometime when it was a bit hotter outside. It's actually a video that we created to see. This is Dutch actually what I'm speaking here. And you see me here, I was doing interviews for people, asking them if they think that we as nerds are actually, or how they thought about nerds. But anyway, that's the side thing. So as you can see here, this is a media player control with a play button, with a progress bar, and with some volume controls. And it has some nice slide in, slide out animations that you can see if I just wait a few seconds. It's already looking quite polished for us. It's just playing. It's just a player that we get for free from Microsoft. Let's take a look at the application bar. The app bar control. That's this one. This one, yes, application bar. So the application bar, as mentioned, is used to place or to group some commands because the application should focus on keeping its commands at some common location, and the application bar is a good control for that. I'm going to show you the code in just a second. I'm going to show you first how it actually works, and then you're going to see that there is really nothing different going on. If you've built some Windows Phone 7 apps, you probably have used the application bar. For some reason it seems to be hanging again. There we go. Okay. Okay. There we go. So by default, you don't see the application bar. As mentioned, you shouldn't be taking any screen state away from the user. So when I right-click, when I use the mouse, or when I touch or swipe in from the top or the bottom if I have a touch device, my application bar appears. Now there is one at the top and one at the bottom. I can make them persistent. As you can see here, I can do whatever I want. I'm clicking. I don't know if you can hear it, but I'm clicking on the application bar and I'm clicking on the application and it doesn't go away. This is a persistent application bar. Now I can also make it go away because this is actually what you should do. This is a bit different from Windows Phone. In most cases, it's persistent there, apart from the menu that slides out, but the application bar is mostly persistent. On Windows 8, it should hide itself. So we can do, for example, a time delay. As you can see here, it's going to take a few seconds and then it's going to hide itself. Go away. Oh, I clicked again. Sorry, I moved the mouse too quickly. 5 seconds. There we go. So it's just hiding itself. We can also do a light dismiss as the persistent mode. So when I make it appear and I click anywhere in the app, it's actually going to be hidden again. So this is actually probably the best way of using the application bar. Let's take a look at the code. I think you're going to be amazed how easy it is to write that application bar. Let's go all the way down to the bottom of this code file. Here you see the application bar. Sounds familiar if you've done some Windows Phone 7, I think. The application bar is just there. You can style it. We'll see styling next week. And in that application bar, the one at the bottom here, I specified the vertical alignment to be bottom, so that's why it appears at the bottom. I gave it a style, nothing really fancy going on. And in that application bar, I placed a grid, and inside of that grid, inside of a stack panel, I placed some buttons which are also styled. Different from Windows Phone is that Windows 8 is not drawing the circle around the icons. For the people who've done some Windows Phone, it's not doing that. In Windows 8, it's not the same behavior as Windows Phone. So you actually have to create the button icon yourself. I don't think that's a really big issue, but it's just something that I want you to know that is a bit different. All right. I have quite a few Visual Studios open. Let's close these down. All right. Let's move on. Collections. As mentioned in the beginning of this topic, Windows 8 has a couple new controls that actually focus a lot on the collection part. Now, why did Microsoft do that? Because they actually thought about the fact that collections are everywhere. A Flickr photo stream, a lot of is actually a list of photos, of pictures. Your files on your disk are actually also a list of files. It's actually a collection of files. It's a collection. News that you see every day, a news overview, it's also a list. Tweets on a Twitter website or on another website are also a list. And also, for example, things like the alarms in Windows, it's also a collection. It's a list of alarms. And of course, the biggest or the best sample or the best example is the start screen in Windows 8, which is actually a huge collection. So collections are important. And Microsoft, to give the developer the opportunity to build an application that handles the collections very well, included a few new XAML controls that almost work identically to the old ones. But they have been optimized for Windows 8 to give you as a developer the opportunity to build a good experience with them. These new controls are the list view, the grid view, the semantic zoom, which is the jump viewer, and the flip view. I'm going to take a look at these in a bit more detail. One thing that is the same for them all, we can use them as you would use another control today. I talked about this already a bit in the previous webinar, and so I really recommend you to look at that one as well if you haven't watched it. I touched on the list view then and the grid view very briefly. And I showed you, and I'm going to show you that demo for the people who don't have the time to look at the old one. Many of these controls, you can use them by just switching the name of the control. For example, the list view. It's basically a Windows 8 list box. Now the list box is a great control, but it's not optimized for touch input. The list view is optimized for Windows 8, and it, for example, features that smooth scrolling, virtualization, which is also supported by the list box in Silverlight, for example, and it also supports, it supports the same programming model. It has a data template that we can use. It's offering the same events. I'm coming back to that in just a second. Not really the same events, but it offers the events that we can use to click on it. This list view is very handy in the snapped view. If you remember the first demo that I gave, which was the empty grid view sample, it was actually using a list view when moving the application to the left or the right, so in the snapped state. I changed my application layer from a grid view to a snap view. To a list view in snap state. Now we can interact, of course, with the items inside of that list view. There is an item click event, which we can use to see which item was clicked. There is a selection mode, which is which we can specify to none, to single or multiple, and then we can enable or disable the clicking. Let's take a look at the list box. The list view. Let me close down this one. Did I change anything? Anyway, let's move to the list view sample. That is this one. Okay, opening the list view. There we go. And let's first run the list view. Then I'm going to show you how it actually works in the code. So this is the grid view. First going to focus on the list view. This is a list view. Notice anything different from a list box? Well, it has some optimizations for Windows 8, like hiding the scroll bar, like virtualization that is in here by default. It's featuring some very smooth scrolling, and if I would do this by using some touch, you would actually see how it's actually very smooth in the scrolling. You see it here as well, doing it just with the mouse, but you see that it's actually really optimized for the touch experience that comes with Windows 8. And let's take a look at the code for this list view. Opening the XAML up and moving all the way to the bottom here. Here we have the list view. And tell me if you see something different that you don't really know. We have an item template. We have an item container style. And then we have a background and so on and so forth. Now, that is things that you already know. Something that you may not that you probably don't know on the list box is selection mode. I have set it to multiple, so I can now, as you can see here, select multiple items and ask the list view which items were selected. That is something new. But for the rest, nothing going on. Now, how was this thing bound actually to its data? Well, let's take a look. I'm gonna kill it before I switch to code. Let's take a look. There we go. So what we see here, the item list view, it has an item source property. You know the item source already, and it is bound to a collection of sample data in this case, and that is in this case a list. So, by the way, we're going to come to the observable collection. The observable collection is not really working in this build version. The events are not being raised. There is an observable vector. This is in this case simply a list. So if you want to work with an observable collection, pay attention because that doesn't really work. And we're going to see that in the next sample. So this is basically a list of items. It's, as you can see, it's an enumerable of items that we are going to show in this list. But it is the item source. There's really nothing different going on here. And that is the item source property used to do the binding to the collection. All right. Now, perhaps a completely new control is the grid view control. And the grid view is, again, a simple control. It is using an item source to it's using an item collection to create a grid-based layout of those items. Again, we showed the grid layout in the previous webinar already a bit. It's basically a grid control that allows you to scroll horizontally through the items. It's allowing you to touch and to swipe on the device to move through your items. It has a wrap grid or a variable sized wrap grid. I'm going to show these in the sample. Basically, the difference between the two is what you see on these two screenshots at the bottom. The variable sized wrap grid allows you to place in items that have different sizes. You can create really cool effects with these. I'm not going to show that in the demo. Yeah, I'm going to show the demo. Sorry. Not as well thought out and as well designed as this one, but anyway. The variable sized wrap grid allows you to place in items of different sizes, as you can see. So the thing with the dog is a much bigger. It takes place of 6 small icons in this variable sized wrap grid. And something that the grid view also supports is grouping. Grouping is basically allowing you to order the items in some sub-collections within the grid view. So groups within the list view. For this, there is a new interface, the iGroup info interface, that you can bind the grid view to a list of iGroup infos. So then you're basically binding to a list of lists. And the grid view will pick that up based on the templates that you specify. We're going to see those in the demo. And it will actually create an appealing grouping scenario for you, allowing the user to find his or her data much quicker. That is also what is done by default by the applications list in the start screen. Okay, let's take a look at the grid view and show how it can group items. I didn't close this one down, that's okay. So I'm going to show you the grid view first. So this is a grid view. And you saw the items moving in slowly from the right. That is offered by default by the grid view. That is a new control that offers this functionality, these smooth transitions and smooth animations to move items in by default. We as a developer get that for free. Now the grid view, as mentioned, allows you to scroll through the items horizontally, swipe to the items horizontally. I can select an item, as you can see here. Oh, there we go. I've clicked. The item click event has triggered. And I get the item that was selected in this case. The selection mode is set to single, I think. Okay. Let's take a look at the code for this grid view. So the grid view, let's move to the first one. It's a grid view. It is exactly the same code as the list view. I can even use the same item template as I'm doing for the list view. I think it is the exact same one. Yes, storefront tile template, storefront tile template. So they work in the exact same way. There is no selection mode here, so you can't select items, but you can click on an item. And when you do click on an item, you actually arrive in this item click event. And then you can ask which was your clicked item in your grid view, and we can get the information of that clicked item in this case. So that is the grid view. Let's take a look at the grouping of the grid view. It's a bit more complicated. There is a new interface for that, so let me open the grouping grid view sample. This one, solution. All right, let's open it up. So we are now going to group the grid view. Let me first show you how the grouping actually looks, and then we're going to see how it is done in this particular case. So here we have a grouped grid view. What you see here is groups, and you see the header, and then you see a group of items. Another header with another group of items. And if you scroll all the way to the right, we see that this header has more items than it can fit in one vertical list, so it's moving on to a second column, basically. That's possible. Okay, let me show you how this thing actually works. So we have the grid view, scrolling all the way to this particular XAML. It's a bit too large to get it on the screen. I'm sorry for that. I'm going to have to scroll. Now, this grouping works by setting templates. It's actually entirely based on some templating in XAML code that allows you to link up the correct data with the correct items. All right. So we have the grid view. Nothing different going on here. We're going to take a look at the items in just a second because that is different as well. It is binding to a list of lists. So what do we need to define? We need to define how the grid view itself will show its items. That is in itself a stack panel. So the entire thing is just a stack panel. That is where the groups are placed in. Then we have the item template. That is per item the information of the grid. Of the grid view items. That is each item which has an image and then has a text block. That is the item template itself. But then there is something really new, and that is the group style. And the group style has a header and it has a panel. This is what happens per group. So per group we have a header template and an items panel template. So each group has a header, and that header is a text block in this case, and that is bound to name. This will always, if you bind to a list of iGroup infos, be the name property that you have to bind to. That is an implicit property basically because that is there by default. It's not something that you have to add. I'm going to show it in the C# code in just a second. Remember that you always have to bind to the name property for your headers when using the iGroup info. And then we have the group style panel, and that is in this case a variable sized wrap grid. Remember that we saw the one on the I don't know what it was, some kind of ice cream. That was the most on the right, the far right. That was actually so each of these was actually a variable sized wrap grid. They all the items at the same size, but they actually are capable of going to next column because it's wrap grid. And if items are bigger, then it will fit in here as well. Now, how do we actually do the binding? Because that is quite important. That's something that you don't know yet. That doesn't exist in Silverlight. We are binding to a collection view source. Collection view source is known from general XAML. Now, let me go to the code behind. There we go. So, as mentioned, we are binding to a list of lists. We are binding to a list of group info lists, which is actually a class that inherits from list but implements the iGroup info. The control supports that in a sense that it knows that it can bind to a list of lists, a list of groups. So what do we do here? We have the store data, which is actually a list of items, but we are going to order it in groups. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to execute this code, which is actually going to do a query on the collection, doing a group by into new group. So then I have my data grouped by key. And I'm going to loop over the results of that query, and I'm going to create a new group info list which implements the iGroup info per key, and I'm going to, so that's the group name, that's the key, and I'm going to add the items that are part of that group. And so I'm going to bind to that, and that actually gives you the result that we just saw. Out of the box, it will work for you. Now the last control that I'm going to show you is semantic zoom, and it is actually quite similar to the group view, but it has an extra level. It is basically allowing you to jump to a higher level, to see your data on a higher level, to make it easier to navigate to a particular block. As you can see, that is the same thing that doesn't really work yet in Windows 8, but it is going to be working in the final version Microsoft set at build. So what you had there is the list of all your apps, and then you could pinch, zoom out, and then you can have the jump view content basically, which is actually a higher view of your data, and it's called semantic zoom. Now semantic zoom is possible to achieve using the jump viewer control. Let me first show you. Of course I cannot pinch on my screen, I can pinch on it, but the only thing that I will get is some greasy stripes on my screen because I don't have a touch screen. So what I'm going to do here, so this is the regular grid view, but it's now nested inside of a jump viewer. So this jump viewer has actually two views, the regular view, and then which is the content view, and then the jump view. So this is the regular view, showing again as a list, as a group view. Now we can say jump to the higher level, and then it will actually show this, which is like an overview of the groups that are laying beneath it. So I can say go to the M, for example, and it immediately goes to the correct group in my items. Now this of course requires that you actually link these two views of your data correctly. Let me show you how you do it. So going a bit more to the bottom. So we have this jump viewer control. That's what you see here. And it has two views, the jump view and the content view. The content view is the exact same thing as what we had earlier. There is a grid view in here which has an item template per item. It has a group style, which each group has a header which is bound to name, and it has a container style as well here. That wasn't in the other one. And then there is an items template, which is again that variable size grid. So that's what you saw. That was the default view, right? Now we need to make sure that my jump viewer knows how to display my data when I go to a higher level and actually link these two views to each other. So therefore, in the jump view, which is the second view of my data, I can add a grid view. And in that grid view, I'm going to specify an item template, which was actually the block of the letters. It's again the group name that I'm going to bind to. So that is the same binding that I'm going to use here. And I'm going to add an items panel as well. And there's another star here. So now it actually knows how to display my data. By setting or by using some code, I can actually make the link between the two. I'm actually going to bind again to a list of iGroup infos. Same thing. I'm going to get that same data. It's more or less the same thing. It's going to do a query on the data, group it into a list of iGroup infos. Then I'm going to bind my collection view source, which is actually the data source of my jump viewer, to that list of iGroup infos. That's the same thing. But now I need to actually make sure that it knows how to display my groups in the jump view. So what I'm going to do here, what I'm going to do for that is this particular line of code. I'm going to ask the jump viewer, give me your jump view, and cast it to a list view base. That item source should be set to the collection view source.view collection groups. So those are the groups, the higher level groups, and then my jump viewer will actually link my higher level views with my regular data headers. And that's why it actually allows me to jump from one view to the other view. All right. So I think apart from that jump view that you've seen that most of the things that you know in the control area, well, you already know them from other technologies that are based on Java. So I think you earned another badge, which is the beam control with Windows 8. And we're going to round up by looking at navigation. This is actually a very short one. And you can earn another badge, which is the navigator badge. Now navigation, how was that done in Silverlight? thinking back of Silverlight, in Silverlight 2 there was no way of doing easy navigation. You had to build it yourself. Starting with Silverlight 3, we had the concept of the navigation application. And the concept of the navigation application is based on a frame and a page. A frame is basically a container that allows you to display pages. They will fill up the entire content given to them by the frame. It's basically an iframe in HTML allowing you to show pages, if you're not familiar with the concept in Silverlight. Now there's something, the last line that says here, pages can now share data. That was not the case in Silverlight. That's correct. Coming back to that in just a second. So the navigation in Windows 8 applications use the same API. They use the same API as in Windows, as in Silverlight or in Windows Phone. That's also more or less the same thing. So we can do a navigate on the frame. We can do a go back and a go forward. Events that we can hook into, like the onNavigated to and the onNavigated from, are also there. There's some new things in here, like the navigation cache mode. I'm coming back to that in just a second. Navigation failed, navigation stopped. All these things are should look familiar if you've worked with navigation in Silverlight. Notice, however, that everything is now not in system namespaces, but it is in Windows namespaces. XAML moved into the Windows namespace in WinRT, so this is actually the WinUI XAML navigation. So conceptually, the frame hosts pages. We can move from one page to another page. I'm going to show that in just a second. In Silverlight, and we could use the navigation service to ask from within a page to navigate to another page. The navigation service was like your hook to the frame, asking the frame to navigate to another page. The navigation service is not available in Windows 8 applications. What we do have, it actually became a bit simpler. We just have to ask on the page this.frame, and then we get a reference to the frame hosting the page. And we can ask the frame to do navigation to another page. We can also, and this is new, share objects between pages. That was not available in Silverlight. People have found all kinds of ways to go around that limitation, like global properties on the application object, or storing something in isolated storage on page 1 and retrieving it in page 2, or even using the iCustom navigation loader in Silverlight. Now in Windows 8 you can simply pass a parameter from one page to the other page, and it's going to appear as a parameter for the constructor in the second page, and that makes things a bit easier. And also something that is new is the navigation cache mode. And the navigation cache mode allows you to ask Windows 8 to cache a page. Ask it to keep that page in memory, and all the associated objects keep on living in memory, even if the page is not visible. This is by default not available in Silverlight. By default in Silverlight, the page will go out of scope when it's not being shown anymore. The same goes for Windows Phone 7. But this is a bit different. We can now make sure that the page and all its objects remains in memory. And the final thing is transitions. It is possible to use a transition when going from page 1 to page 2 to make things a bit smoother. By default, it will just replace, when you go from page 1 to page 2 will simply replace page 1. But by adding an entrance themes transition, it is possible to benefit from the things offered by Windows 8, the smooth transitions, that is built into the framework now, making it possible to actually do smooth navigations between your pages. All right, let us take a look to round up this webinar to navigation. That's this one. So let's take a look at how we can navigate. We first run the sample. Notice here the Windows namespaces containing the Silverlight, the Windows 8 code. In this case, we are using the XAML namespaces. So here we see a frame, and pardon me for the bad colors, but here we see a frame, and the frame is actually this part of the screen. I hope you see the mouse moving. So it's actually where the red block is shown. That is where the frame is. I can go to page 2, I can go back to the previous page. And let me first go to the code and disable on page 1, that's this one, this navigation cache mode. Let me run it again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to another color. So there we go. I'm going to change the color. I'm now going to navigate to page 2. At this point, page 1 is out of scope. The object is being destroyed. I can go back to the previous page and it's red again. It didn't keep its state because it's basically gone. It's not being shown. By enabling, as you can see here, the navigation cache mode for page 1, for the page 1 object, I set it to enabled, as you can see here. My page object remains in memory even after it has gone out of scope. And scope being visible, basically. So I change the color again, I change to page 2, and I go back to the previous page, and you see that it's still blue, or aqua, or whatever. It is actually being kept in memory because of the navigation cache mode. And this is something new in Silverlight. Now let's take a look at the code of the frame. So we have the main page here, which defines a frame. You also saw, and perhaps I should emphasize a bit on it. Let me show it again. You see that page 1, the red block, is actually moving in. Go to page 2. You see again that the page is not abruptly changing the contents. It's actually smoothing in. That's really good. And this is done, this is achieved by using the entrance theme transition, as you can see here. So on the frame, I can define a content transition. And in this case, a transition collection contains my entrance themes transition, which has an horizontal offset of 200, making pointing to the fact that how many pixels it's going to move in from the height. This is my frame. You see here, and this is something that is a bit different. By default in Silverlight, you would specify here page1.xaml. Now you don't specify a XAML page anymore. You specify the type. In this case, I'm specifying here the fully qualified type is the navigation, is the name of the project, .page1. So that is the default page that you should show. In page 1, I think it is in main page, I'm not really sure. Yeah. In page 1, in the main page, I ask to navigate to page 2. So what I'm doing here is I'm navigating to the name of the type that I want to load in, and look at what is the second overload here. It's actually an object, and that is the parameter. So if I would, for example, type comma here, the second parameter is the object that I'm going to pass along with the navigation when going from page 1 to page 2. This was previously not possible. And as mentioned, there is no navigation service anymore. So when we are inside of a page, we can't say navigation service.navigate. We simply say this.frame, please navigate to page 3 in this case. So here we say, give me a reference to the frame and make sure that the frame navigates to a particular page. So with that, yeah, that's fine. With that, we have earned another badge, as you can see here. We have earned another badge, the navigator, because I think concepts of navigation have remained exactly the same in Windows 8. The frame, the page concept is still there. It has changed a very small bit, but I think when looking at it for a couple of minutes, we'll be up and running with it in no time. And I see that I forgot to delete this slide because we're going to do this next week. So taking a look at what we already saw today, we saw that general XAML stuff, general XAML knowledge like rows and star layout and stretch properties and stuff. Make sure that we can build flexible, fluid layouts. That's something that we know how to do in Silverlight. We can apply that in Windows 8. Controls. Most controls are still there. They support things like data binding. They support styling. We'll see that next week. They also support the same properties, so that is something that we can really carry forward with as well. And navigation as well is the same concept. So next week we are going to be talking about a lot more, including styling, including application lifecycle, and focusing heavily on the data part next week. We're going to see how we can access services, how we can work with WCF services, with REST services, I'm also going to show you how you can achieve talking with your local host, because that is something that is not supported by default in Windows Metro apps. So you know already, let's say, 30–40% of what I'm going to be talking about. So next week we'll continue where we left off today. So I think we can now open it up for questions. I assume there's going to be many questions, isn't there?
Yes, so we have more than 10 questions so far, and more coming up. So we have 10 minutes to respond to as many as possible questions, and whatever remains unreplied, we'll reply by email. So Jill, just to remind you, read the entire question before answering it, so everyone may hear.
But I don't see the questions yet.
Oh, okay.
Now I see them. Yeah, yeah. It was still empty. No, I see only one question. Is that possible?
Yeah, no. I'm assigning them right now to you. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. There might be questions that I really don't know yet. I have not tested everything. So Metro apps and multi-monitor, does that make sense in a way of snapping? Well, that is a good question. At this point, I think not. It's not really. I think that SnapView is not really aimed at being used in a multi-monitor scenario. I'm really not sure. I haven't tested it how this actually behaves on a multi-monitor, but I don't think that snapping is something that snapping is something that's going to be really useful in a touch scenario. But I'm not really sure that. I might rethink my opinion on this when I work with it daily, but at this point I don't really think that I'm going to use SnapView in my day-to-day work, because think of the fact that we are working in the Metro environment here. Metro apps are not your Visual Studio or your Word, maybe Word, I don't know, but at this point SnapView is aimed at the touch experience, the Metro experience, and I don't think Metro and multi-monitor are perhaps really what Microsoft is aiming at. I could be wrong here, but that's my opinion on these things at this point. Okay, this screen is really acting weird. So that was the multi-monitor question. So Helen here asks, will code developed for Windows 8 controls degrade nicely if used on a Win 7 box? So this code that you saw here is exclusively working on Windows 8. So I don't know of any plans of making this code work on any other environment than Windows 8. So I don't think so. I don't think that Microsoft will ever support it. This is the new thing for Windows 8. So there is no way that you can actually say I'm going to use this app and run it on a Windows 7 box. So that is basically not possible. So that was that question. Virtualization, is that available for other controls? Yes, it is. It's not only for the list view at this point. I think the grid view also supports it. I could be wrong, but I think it's actually supported on the grid view as well. And if not, it will. No, it is actually supported. I've tested that with a Flickr sample. Another question here is there any way I can develop a Silverlight application today and make it easy to move it forward to WinRT? Well, that is a very good question. I think that if the application, it of course depends on the application. That is something that I have to emphasize. I see applications today that we've built in Silverlight that may move to Windows 8 perfectly. Other ones, I see that they are not really a perfect fit to be transferred into Windows 8 because of the context perhaps, or perhaps the way that people interact with them. So I think it really depends on the application. That being said, I think that if you build your application today using standard Silverlight knowledge, things like MVVM, things like data binding, things like styling, it will be quite easy to actually port it. Make sure that you keep in mind things like that it is supporting fluid layout, things that we talked about. Make sure that these things are in there. If you use an MVVM scenario, that will carry forward into Windows 8 as well. That doesn't, it supports MVVM already, but not a one-to-one copy. but it is actually possible to actually move things around. And I think if you keep in mind the things that we already saw, like the navigation part, if you use that, if you today in Silverlight use a list box and you will move it forward to Windows 8 in a list view, that also will probably be actually quite easy to do. I think one last thing about this is that apart from the fact that you can reapply your knowledge, I don't really think that you can do one-to-one copy of your XAML code. You will probably be able to do it, but that might not offer a perfect experience in the Windows 8 world, because your Silverlight app is created with mouse and keyboard in mind. Metro apps are, let's face it, optimized for touch. So if you move from one to the other, I think you will have to rethink some of your screen divisions and screen layouts. But conceptually, your knowledge will will carry forward, and part of your design and stuff will also be able to forward to Windows 8. Let me perhaps go to someone else's question. Someone asked here, how many levels deep can we go on a jump view? At this point, you can't do anything else but the jump view and the content view. It's you're probably thinking of deep zoom. How can we move deeper and deeper in here? At this point, as far as I know, it's only possible to do the semantic zoom outwards. That gives you the jump view, and then move into the code. Okay, we are going to let me scroll through the questions a bit to see if we have some. So someone asks here: is Metro start scrolling again? Is Metro going to be available to do in the desktop? Are only in Metro, so our Metro apps basically locked in the Metro environment? Well, of course they are. It is indeed only possible to run Metro apps inside of the Metro environment. There's no way that that you can move out the Metro environment and simply run your Metro app inside of the desktop mode, at least at this point. Remember what we remember the slide. Oops. Let's scroll back to the beginning of this slide. Remember this particular slide here. I hope you can see it. Remember this particular slide where there is a clean separation between desktop and Metro. It's basically two environments. You can see the Metro environment as like a layer on top of Windows. Desktop view, your desktop mode being one view of your possible view of your applications, and Metro view being another place to run applications. It's basically two versions of Windows, and there's no way at this point that I know of that you can actually move the one to the other. Okay, so that was this particular question here. Someone asks, oops, I think I've closed the wrong question. So, someone asks, is it it's actually a question about data binding and styling. Let me quickly. So someone asked, is it possible to do data binding in styling? Well, at this point, as far as I know, it is not possible, because the bindings that we have are more or less what we have in Silverlight 4. And that the feature that Dennis in this case is referring to is added with Silverlight 5, and so that is not supported. I don't know how it is going to be in the final release. At this point, think of the data binding as more or less what you can do in a Silverlight 4. That was this question. Someone asks about printing. I really don't know. I really don't know if that already works. And someone else asks about RIA services. Well, that is a good question. I've thought about that in a sense that I'm wondering about it myself. At this point, of course, there is no support yet to build RIA apps with Metro-style apps with RIA services. That is not supported. However, you can expose RIA services with for example, for ASP.NET as well, for Windows Phone as well. So that scenario is supported, but the real close integration between a Metro app and and real services, that is at this pace not supported. That was, wait 1 second, where was this question? That was this one. Someone asked here, is there an equivalent in WinRT, for example, for the launchers and choosers? For the people who don't know what a launcher and chooser in Windows Phone is, it's basically your a layer, an API that sits in between your app and functionality of the device. For example, the camera, you cannot, in Windows Phone 7 menu, you can directly integrate with the camera. But for example, the best example is making a call. You will never be able to make a call directly from the app because that would be a security risk. People could write a malicious app that starts calling on your behalf. Now, in Windows 8, there is no real launcher and chooser API, but there is something, and that is the runtime broker. And if you look about it, if you look it up, it's the runtime broker. It's basically your app has to, and that is quite similar to what we have in Windows. Phone. Let me open a Visual Studio once more, and let me show you. This is not normally part of this talk, but it doesn't matter. So when we open this manifest file here, so the manifest file is basically it's a manifest file. It says what your app is going to do, and it also contains something called capabilities. And a capability is comparable to what your Windows Phone 7 application would do. It's actually declaring what it's actually going to do with the device. For example, we say that we have a webcam. So if we do this, if we run this app, if we would run this app and do something with the webcam, there is a class called the camera capture UI. But that class is only going to be allowed to run after you have, in this tab, in this capabilities tab, declared that your app is going to use the webcam. That is going to be ported probably later when the Windows Store is going to be announced or opened, so that your app can declare that it's going to use the webcam. And then there is a block, and that is the runtime broker I was referring to earlier, that sits in between your app and functionality of the operating system, that only allows your app to interact with the webcam after the user has clearly indicated that he wants to do that. So there is no real API, but it's actually it's basically the same concept that you have here. Right? The capabilities combined with the runtime broker offer you more or less the same functionality as the the launchers and choosers. I seem to have closed the questions once more. 1 second.
Well, Jill, let's have one last question and wrap up this session, because we have many more questions coming up, and it's impossible to reply to all of them.
I think there's going to be a lot of questions still popping up. I'm looking. Someone asked here, is RX, so reactive extensions, and MEF. I think that is going to be supported. I hope, at least. I'm not really sure about the fact that that is going to be supported at this case. It's not supported, I think. So I hope, because I use MEF quite a lot in my day-to-day work, but I don't think at this point it is supported. So I think then the rest of the questions we'll take them offline.
Yes, so I just want to let everyone know that the answers to all remaining questions will be published in one file, and this file will be available along with the recording within the next 3 or 4 days. Otherwise, the recording, as well as all demos and sources used here in this webinar, will be available online tomorrow. On Silverlight Show website, you can check the homepage, and we'll also email them to everyone who attended or missed this webinar. So I would like to invite you to sign up for part 2, which will take place next Thursday at the same time, 10 a.m. PST. So if you want to see the registration page, just visit Silverlight Show homepage tomorrow, and we'll have there the registration announced. Right now I invite
you to chime in, so sorry to interrupt. So I forgot in this slide that we're also going to be styling and templating next week. So that is also part of next week's webinar. That is so it's 5 topics next week that we have.
Okay, yeah, and the webinar will perhaps be slightly longer than this session. So thanks, Jill. This great session. I think that most people enjoyed it, and judging by the questions, obviously it spurred a lot of interest. I encourage everyone now to complete our post-webinar survey and submit any feedback you have on this webinar. Jill will take into consideration any recommendations you have for the next part as well. So thanks again for attending, and thanks, Jill, for your time. And look forward to an even more interesting session next week.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, have a good evening, everyone. Bye.
Bye.